can you learn in the next 21 minutes? We're here to find out. Welcome to the 21 in 21 Talks, where invited speakers share their 21-minute talks about all kinds of topics, ranging from beer brewing to building a business. This series consists of 21 talks, 21 minutes long, all taking place in 2021. Speakers can choose to use slides or choose to forego them entirely as long as they keep it to 21 minutes. The floor is theirs. All talks can be watched live or as replays on the Association Chat YouTube channel. And I'm your host, Kiki L'Italienne. For this inaugural 21 in 21 talk, I'm still getting used to saying it, we're featuring Michael Butera. Michael is a longtime CSO and community organizer, CEO of Association Activision Consulting for nonprofits. He's dedicated to thinking with the future in mind. This talk covers the need for long-term thinking when making a decision. Please type into the chat or clap your hands at home as we welcome Michael to the stage for his talk, Don't Be a 21st Century Dino. All right, welcome, Michael. I give the floor to you.
Well, thank you very much, Kiki. I'm really looking forward to this. Thanks for the opportunity to make sure that we don't become dinosaurs. I'm going to share a few slides with everybody, and we're going to talk about short-term and long-term decisions and the whole idea of thinking with the future in mind. So assuming I've got the technology done correctly, we're about to share the first screen. So let me get this up for everybody. And we should be in pretty good shape. Let me cancel out and bring it up. Okay, with a little bit of luck, we're sharing. Let's see if we have this correctly. Share screen, application, and here we go. Beginning. Okay, folks, I'd like to press you to think about three big questions. And as you do this, if you have questions, put them in the chat, and Kiki can interrupt me, and we'll try to make this work. And we are going to stay within that 21 minutes. So when you think about short-term and long-term decisions, I'd like you to think about three big issues. What contributes to short-term decisions? Why do we do it? What makes that so natural for us? And secondly, what elements of organizational well-being may be sacrificed as a result of this short-term thinking? And third, what benefits or practices are necessary for long-term or future thinking? And I promise you that I'll offer you at least one suggestion on how to work our way through this. So what contributes to our short-term decision thinking concept? Really, it's pretty simple when you come right down to it. We have a lot of reasons why we think short-term. And most of them have to do with immediacy. That is the whole idea of thinking about things in terms of instant gratification and why that occurs. So I'm having a little trouble with the slides, so I'm not going to let that bother me. I'm just going to move right on. This whole idea of why we do things for the short term often comes out of crises. It comes out of a need to make a quick decision now in the sense of finances. Another big reason is, a lot of people think that's what leadership's all about. Let's make a decision here and get it done. Those decisions don't necessarily work to all of our advantages. So let's move on and talk about a wonderful experiment that was done years ago. And it's called the Marshmallow Experiment. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Marshmallow Experiment, but in short, it's one of the classic psychological experiments that was done at Stanford University. And it was done with young children. And this is basically how it worked. Young children, this is very young children under the age of 6 or 7, were put together in a room, and they were all given one marshmallow. and they were told that they could eat the marshmallow at any time they wanted just by asking the adult, the experimenter, if you would, to come into the room. Or if they waited for about 15 minutes and the experimenter came in on his or her own, then they would get a second marshmallow. Well, as you can see from the slide here, we know that an awful lot of children decided, I'll eat the marshmallow. Let's ask that guy in here. Let's ask that woman in here. But we do know of those that waited, for those who decided to get their gratification just a little later. They tended over 30 years to have higher test scores, lower body mass index, and achieve better in terms of higher competencies in parenting. This is pretty significant if you think about it for just a few moments. So gratification is one of these main drivers. Crises is one of these main drivers. And, we've just been through a kind of messy year. So that messy year hasn't helped us in terms of moving forward at all. So how does that work in a business setting for us in the nonprofit, or for that matter, in the profit world? Well, McKinsey Global Institute, one of the premier consulting firms in the profit area, did the similar experiment, except this time they looked only on the financial side, because what they heard is the reason we do this is because we have to make our quarter, we have to make this month's numbers, and so forth and so on. Well, those who chose long-term decisions versus short-term satisfaction, that is the monthly or the quarterly dollars, one, they achieved 36% greater earnings. Two, higher revenue, as you might suspect, higher profits. They achieved economic superiority over their competitors. They created more jobs. And during the financial crisis of 2008-9, they recovered more quickly. All this leads us to understand that there is an enormous amount of value in thinking long-term, in thinking futuristically, instead of just on the short term. Now, let's be candid. There are short-term decisions that have to be made. No question about it. Let's look at the second question. What elements of organizational well-being are sacrificed with short-term decisions? Well, there's a failure to see the impact over the long term. I'm going to give you a personal example in just a few moments, but think about it. If you don't think about what's going to happen in the long sense of the word, then these short-term decisions, they might save you for the next 2 weeks, the next month and a half. But will they accrue to your benefit over the long haul? Or will there be unintended consequences that you have to pay for in a different way? Another element is this lack of crisis planning. Now, we might have a crisis plan for if our conference is snowed out, if there's a tragic accident at the conference center. We have crisis marketing plans when something goes wrong. But are we practicing all the levels of planning? So there's operational plans, there's strategic development and plans, and there are contingency plans. Contingencies are almost always not thought about, particularly in the not-for-profit sector. And why is this so? Because we don't practice this idea of scenario planning. We just think about the way the world is instead of the way the world might be. What's the environment yet to come, and so forth and all. And after all, act and forgiveness will come later. Well, all those things together don't necessarily provide us with the opportunity to be the most purposeful, the most insightful that we can possibly be. So then what could possibly be the benefits of the practice of long-term or future thinking? Well, let's look at them. The first one is stewardship. After all, don't we want to leave our institutions better than when we came to them? Whether you're a member of the board, the CSO, or a member of the staff, isn't it important that the organization is stewarded for the future and not just led down whatever road appears at the moment? This also affords us an opportunity to capacity build. We can build better boards to think more strategically. We can build better staffs that have a more holistic view of the organizational goals and the organization's mission and where we're headed. This whole idea of capacity. What are the things that we have to be good at that we're not already good at? How can we offer what we know better than the next person? Then there's the idea of strategic foresight. We're going to walk our way through that in just a few moments, but think of it this way. It's not just about a strategic plan. It's about having foresight and understanding, a thinking of the possibilities, an understanding of the data that we have available. Strategic foresight to focus appropriately on what there might be in the future. And there's another great benefit. When the storm comes, there's more calm if you have a plan. Now, a lot of people don't particularly like military examples, but the military is famous for scenario planning, practicing out unbelievable circumstances that they might have to deal with. So as I said a little bit ago, well, if the fire bell rings, everybody pretty much knows to get out of the building. On the other hand, it's likely that the building has a little chart, and the little chart has something that says, if you're in this place, you walk out this way. You don't use the elevator. May not be the best plan in the world, but it certainly gets you out the door. So obviously there was some planning done, and the result of that is calm. It's why schools practice fire drills and the like. What fire drills have you practiced at your association? And I don't mean just about the building or the area, but the whole idea of, are we practicing for potential outcomes that we didn't think about in the first order? So here's a personal life example of short versus long-term thinking and planning. Most of us someday want to retire. And in order to retire, there have to be some savings. Years ago, companies had defined benefit programs. Every month, so much money was put in. You knew if you spent so many years, you were going to end up with from 50 to 75% of your annual wage when you retired, plus Social Security. But do we really do that? According to the Economic Policy Institute, which you can see on the screen here, Americans, this data is from 2019, Americans ages 32 to 37 save about half as much money as they need to save in order to have a sensible, meaningful, life-fulfilling retirement. So it isn't just in our organizations that we don't practice long-term engagement. It's also that we don't practice it in our own personal lives. And this one piece of retirement is a good way of thinking about it on a personal level instead of the institutional level we've been talking about up to this point. So you need a strategy. And a strategy to think long term is what I refer to, and many now in the industry refer to, as the practice of foresight. And there's 6 elements associated with how we can do this. All of them have an importance in their own, but collectively, this is the best way for us to make short and long-term decisions, because there will always be a need for some immediacy. So let's take a look at what we have to offer. The first part of any strategic foresight thinking requires framing. The whole idea of how we see the issues, how we see our place in the environment, how we see the scope of the work, and so forth. It's not difficult to do. It requires a little bit of time and energy, but framing is step one in making sure that the short term we do enhances our well-being in the long term. Second, we need to practice scanning. Now, there's all kinds of scans, in traditional strategic planning, there's always been, the external and the internal scan. But fundamental to this idea is something a lot more immediate for the organization, and that is the data we have must be clean and healthy data. And we must put it in perspective with the environment in which we are operating. So first we frame, scope. Second, we scan. We make sure that the data we have is legitimate data, not just information. Lots of information floating out there. But what are we able to scan in a meaningful way for the well-being of our organizations? Third is forecasting. Those familiar with design thinking, you can think of this as the ideation stage, where we begin to look at what potential futures are. What are the scenarios that might exist? How is it that we are going to attack where the organization will find itself 3 and 5 and 10 years from now? Now, these horizons will change over time, but it's important that we engage in forecasting. So now we've framed, we've scanned, we've done some forecasting. Next, we have to place this into a vision and a purpose, and it must be intentional. Why is it that we move in this direction? Is this vision, is the purpose of our institution running in the right direction? Not just for our own members, but for our total stakeholder community, including those who in the association world may not be dues payers, who may be partners of another nature, or the invasion of government scrutiny. And if it's worldwide, you have to think about what happens in Europe versus what happens here in the States, and so forth and so on. So the fourth part of our thinking of how to be more long-term and practicing the foresight concept, is to have a vision, which the next time I'll spell right on the slide. And finally, next there's the plan. Now, we don't mean a plan, we mean multiple plans. This is where we talk about, should we have some scenarios? Should we practice some of the things that may occur if our forecasting is on target? Now, you can do this in a lot of different ways, but this is the one I'm suggesting. Create some scenarios, what might happen, and actually work them out. Take a day out of the schedule and say to the staff, this just happened. What do we do? And see if they practice the principles we've outlined here. Do they know the scope of the issue? Are they using the right data? Can they forecast what the potential outcomes might be in the environment that they see? Whether or not the vision for that fits with the purpose of the organization, and whether or not we can put on paper a plan, not just operational, but one that lets us think of the potential of what might occur. And finally, we act. We put this into actionable, workable tasks for us to accomplish. If we practice these foresight principles frame, scan, forecast, vision, plan, and act. If we do those things, it is highly probable that we won't be the dinosaur of the 21st century. And let me mention here, while I put my own information up, if you want to try to get in touch with me, think of what Darwin told us all those years ago. Most people, when they hear Darwin, they think the wrong thing. They hear, they see, they believe he said survival of the fittest. That's not what he said. What he said, more accurately, was it is not the most intelligent that survive, or the strongest that survive, but rather those best able to adapt to the environment. And we need to adapt to the environments that are yet to come. And so I'm asking you, and believe that it's essential, that what we really do here now is to think about our short-term decisions as if they had long-term impact. And if we do those things, we'll avoid being that 21st century dinosaur. We will be a well thought out, a well prepared, a financially solvent, a purposeful driven institution to achieve the goals and aspirations of those we represent and the community to which we want to serve. So I want to thank you for your time today. I tried to make sure I could get through this in the allotted time. I even put a timer on, Kiki. I'm just short of 20 minutes, so I have a whole minute of extra time, for everybody. But to you, my thanks. To all our friends out there and those that have been with us today, thank you as well for listening. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn, and enjoy your wonderful day. Think with the future in mind.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. You were amazing. Thank you for sharing your 21 in 21 talk with us today. So if you want to find out more about Michael, if you want to reach out, his LinkedIn information is here at the bottom of the screen. You can also reach him at this email address, also at the bottom of the screen. And be sure to tweet him because he's active on Twitter as well. Tweet Michael and let him know what you thought about his session today, talking about not being a 21st century dino. I just ask that you keep asking questions every day to keep learning because, as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. We have more of these great talks coming up. Thank you so much to Michael for being our inaugural 21 in 21 talk. And I hope the rest of you have a fabulous rest of the week. All right.